So if you're trying to buy a home in the U.S., you're going to know this is probably a problem for you, especially if you make under a certain amount of money. I'm going to read this article. This is the BBC. So what do they know? But they think they know something about this. So let's give them a chance. So priced out of home ownership, it makes me want to throw up. When Nathan Wilkins moved back in with his mother and his sister in 2019, he hoped it would help him save money to buy a home. But in the years since, the U.S. housing market has been transformed by rising rents, surging home prices, and a massive jump in mortgage rates, making home ownership seem ever more impossible. He and his sister are making more money than ever, the 32-year-old insurance adjuster from Utah says, but shelling out $2,500, or basically 2,000 euros a month, in rent doesn't leave much left over. It's like I'm playing a game that you can't win, he says. The fact that we're being priced out just makes me want to throw up. Such frustrations are spreading, fueling dissatisfaction, contributing to the widespread pessimism about the U.S. economy that is looming over the country's upcoming election. The median home sale price in the U.S. has jumped by nearly 30% since the end of 2019, hitting $420,000 this spring. That's the median price. So if you live in any of these, you live in New York or LA or, some of these higher price markets, that's not even close. That's not going to get you much. I know 420,000 Canadian isn't in the area I live in. Probably doesn't even get you a condo. Actually, doesn't. You couldn't even get a knockdown for that. So, at a time of rising property values globally, the leap has been one of the most dramatic in the world. That's not factoring in the added cost from higher interest rates, which now stand at roughly 7% for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage that is typical in the U.S., up from about 3% in 2020. That's crazy. Just 4 years later, it's over double. Homebuyers today need an annual income of more than $100,000, well above the country's household median of about $75,000, to comfortably afford a home in most places in the U.S. Research firms such as Zillow and Bankrate say and face monthly payments that have roughly doubled in just 4 years. Now, here we go. Here's your dose of woke. It all makes me cry a bit, says Megan Holter, who started looking to buy in Austin, Texas back in 2019 when banks were offering her a 30-year fixed rate of about 4.75%. She halted her search when the pandemic hit, priced out by the surging costs of building materials and homes. She and her wife finally bought a home this year, but only after swallowing a 6.625% rate and moving 1,200 miles north to Columbus, Ohio, a spot selected from a spreadsheet she created of cities with lower costs. That's pretty sad when you've got to just move across the country to where you can afford to buy a house. Not a lot of people can do that realistically. If you got a job that won't let you relocate or anything like that. Like, good thing is a lot of these jobs, they don't care. They're paying you garbage anyway, so it's like you can just leave and go get another job, I guess. But pretty sad state of affairs we're in altogether. Housing affordability was the number one thing that we were considering for 5 years, says the 30-year-old, who also switched jobs from the public sector to the private sector to make home buying happen. We have moved mountains to make it possible. I'm just eternally grateful that we can afford it. I know a lot of people cannot, she adds. Just 40.1% of renters expect to ever own a home one day, according to the New York Federal Reserve, the smallest share since the bank started asking renters the question in 2014. Even homeowners whose long-term mortgages shield them from immediate financial impact and who benefit from rising property values tell pollsters that the changes in the market are a source of concern as they push up property taxes and insurance costs while making moving a less affordable prospect. Nearly 1/3 of all households now spend more than 1/3 of their income on housing. That's crazy. When you think about it, 1/3 of your income, or more than 1/3 of your income, goes to housing. That's nuts. If you talk to people that lived in the 80s, like even the 80s were rough, but even pre-80s, 70s, 60s, they'll tell you it was like to buy a house was basically like 2 times your annual income or something. So homeownership was easily affordable. Okay. So a recent Harris poll found more than 70% of Americans believe the market is only going to get worse. The issue is feeding into wider worries about rising living costs, which have jumped 20% since 2021. Weird how it's since 2021. That's kind of weird. Who got into office in 2021? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. Maybe I'm asleep. It's among the biggest challenges facing President Joe Biden, whose time in office has coincided with the housing market's transformation who receives dismal ratings for his handling of the economy in national polls. Challenger Donald Trump, who fares better, has sought to blame Mr. Biden for inflation, and though he does not typically call out housing specifically, he regularly spotlights skyrocketing interest rates to argue that the economy is heading in the wrong direction. Inflation has been a political noose for Biden in recent years, says Brian Connolly, professor of business law at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, whose work focuses on housing issues. Housing costs are another place where people are experiencing this financial squeeze. In recent months, the White House has tried to address concerns about affordability head on, offering proposals such as rules to limit closing costs and a $10,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers. Well, obviously, I agree with the first-time homebuyer tax credit. We've been doing something like that in Canada for a while, where it's not a tax. It's the same sort of thing, but you have to pay back, obviously, right? It's you can take it from your RSPs and then you pay it back every year. RSPs, if you don't know, are registered retirement savings. So you can do that and then just pay it back. So it's a program they've done for a long time. It's not bad. I used it when I bought my first house, but that's not really going to do anything. It just puts little dents in it. The real thing is, you've got to put more money into the market to allow home builders to build more, which would drive the price down. Obviously, supply and demand drive the price down of the materials. To drive the amount of homes available out there, so there's a lot of supply, and then the demand goes down a little, so you drive those prices down. But unfortunately, if something like that happens, obviously people that already own a home are not going to be, they're going to be a little bit opposed because it's going to drive the price of their home down. But we got to do something. These skyrocketing prices are just making it crazy. And if you know anything about, communities that don't have home ownership, you'll see that there's not a lot of vested concern or interest in those communities. So it just shows that people that own homes actually have care and concern about their community. And if people just don't, and they're just renting and they're paying for someone else's property, well, they're not really going to give a shit too much altogether. So makes for a recipe for disaster.